Since 1999, the Philippines has held a Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA, with the United States, which supports their Mutual Defense Treaty. The agreement is basically perfunctory, providing the legal basis and status protections for U.S. military personnel in the Philippines. But what the VFA enables is manifold. For example, the planning and delivery every year of Philippine-US-led exercises such as Balikatan, Kamandang, Salik-Nip and Sama-Sama, which is currently underway. Now, the Philippines currently has 3 agreements ratified with the US, Australia and Japan, with a 4th, New Zealand, signed on April 30th, 2025, awaiting ratification. 5 other publicly disclosed countries are Canada, France and Italy under negotiations, whereas South Korea and the UK have expressed interest. As a whole, they represent a new strategic military diplomacy on the part of the Philippines in an increasingly high-stakes waterway. Professor Chen, let me start with you first. So why is it that China has accused the Philippines of essentially bringing NATO or creating an Asia-Pacific NATO in the region, whereas these are bilateral agreements for the Philippines?
So multiple bilateral agreements can be considered as a multilateral agreement, right? But I will argue that they are still different.
Right.
All right. What you can see right now in Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific is still a hub and spoke system created and maintained by the United States. What China really worries about is that the regional countries in Asia Pacific really united together to create containment against China. China really was aware that regional countries were dissatisfied with its rise and might come together to counter it. And they might introduce external forces like the United States to assist them. So China is trying to break up this kind of alliances.
Right, Renato, a couple of points there. Professor said China may think that the US and allies and Philippines are trying to contain its rise. But what's the Philippines' perspective on this? And interestingly, hub and spoke around the US, are we actually seeing perhaps as hub and spoke around the Philippines developing?
Well, what we're happening, of course, is the transformation of the hub and spoke system of alliances to something that is kind of akin to NATO.
Still, I want to get back to this idea of hub and spoke around the Philippines.
Well, that's also part, that policy is not new. It began actually during the time of the late President Benigno Aquino III.
You mean the first VFA?
Yeah, not even that.
Okay.
It began actually after the devastating typhoon that hit Manila in 2013. That's
recently, the the speed of these being negotiated and signed. This is more sort of placing the Philippines as a kind of hub, isn't it?
We don't want to put it that way. We don't have the capability, like the hub in the hub of spoke system, the United States. We don't have that military capability to act as the hub. So what we're basically doing is just like going into a party. We're inviting people to join into the party as a humble host among those very rich, very affluent guests.
Maybe you're being more humble than you need to be, Professor.
Let me add that hub and spoke is an academic term. We use this to describe a situation where the U.S. sit in the middle and try to maintain all the bilateral.
But I'm asking you to consider this as a new model. So countries coming together, they want to deter aggression. China is the only one that has said that it will not rule out force, for example, against Taiwan. It's shown very aggressive behavior in the South China Sea towards the Philippines. Japan had wanted to open, Professor, a NATO office, but then that was rejected because of the pressures brought about by China. Do you think that what the Philippines has achieved has actually gone beyond that?
Well, I think what the Philippines has achieved is tremendous. Okay, I agree that it is a very good achievement for Filipino security. And this shows that regional country is concerned about China's behavior, especially those behavior targeting the Philippines. So they recognize that the Philippines needs aid, and because they also recognize if they do not provide assistance to Philippines right now, they might be the next victim. I think there is a growing consensus among the Indo-Pacific countries that China is a growing military threat, and we need to do something to deter it. And also, you can say that China's military behavior shows exactly what these countries are fear for.
And Renato, why is it that these NATO member countries, for example, France, UK, Canada, that they're essentially all lining up, keen to engage and strike these agreements with the Philippines? Why?
Well, one factor, of course, is the fact that they have come out, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and many members of NATO have come out with their own specific Indo-Pacific strategy, which is actually a euphemism or a code. We have to go into the Indo-Pacific region because there is a great power there that might close the region. And everyone knows for a fact it's China. It also has something to do with what happened with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and, of course, the policy of the Trump administration. I've been to Europe several times, engaged them in a academic dialogue about the fact that the European countries are telling the United States we are faced with two threats, a Eurasian threat, Russia and China. So you cannot simply focus on the Indo-Pacific. We would assist you in the Indo-Pacific. So that's why don't drop us like a hot potato in NATO or in the Indo-Atlantic region. We would assist you.
My point in saying that I push back on this being NATO, let's talk about that because, it's true that when we talk about NATO, we talk about the Mutual Defense Treaty, Article 5.
Right.
So this is not that, unless you are saying that there is that.
No, it is not that. So there are two unique things about NATO. First of all, it is an agreement of multiple industrialized countries, very capable of fighting. Second of all, the Article 5 is pretty special. In alliance treaties, an unconditional assistance to your allies when your allies being attacked by an external threat. This is really rare, okay, in the history of alliance. So a NATO-like treaty will be a very strong commitment from the members. So I don't think that regional countries are ready to build such a treaty. But they are willing to assist each other on security issues. That's true.
Okay, so let's drill down to what those security issues are, Renato. Aside from the technical details of logistics and taxation and stuff, what do these visiting forces agreements, reciprocal access agreements, what do they enable these countries to do that they couldn't do before?
Again, unique in the case of the Philippine-U.S. security relation. Aside from the visiting force agreement, we also have the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which of course provides for facilities within AFP camps for American forces to station their equipment to stay there for a definite period of time. At least at this point, 6 months, or in the case of the deployment of the Typhoon missile and Nemesis, they have been there for more than a year. So it provides for longer stationing of forces that's not provided if you have, of course, you don't have a visiting force agreement. So that's a very important element there when we talk about those status of forces agreement.
And that was a very important point, Professor Chen. The Typhoon missile system and some others. Is it true that under this visiting forces agreement, or at least the one with the US, it's also about the pre-positioning of weapons?
So first of all, we should distinguish the function of VFA and RAA. So VFA, just like Renato said, it is regulating the legal rights, privilege of foreign forces. So the agreement itself doesn't mean the cooperation. It means you have to have this in order to have a smooth cooperation.
Yeah, but we do want to get to what does it mean? Yeah, what does it enable? So we've talked about exercises. We've hinted at the weapons.
Right.
Let's get down to an actual scenario. What would happen in case of a Taiwan crisis, for example? The Telegraph basically said that, with the UK agreeing or wanting to engage in these sorts of negotiations in order to strike a VFA, that British troops would be present or stationed in the Philippines, only 200 kilometers away from Taiwan.
So as I said, VFA comes after a defense pact, right? After a treaty or a mother agreement. So countries must have commit something before they sign VFA. So far, the VFA are signed, especially when you look at the VFA negotiation between the Philippines and France. You can see that these negotiations are meant for facilitating military cooperation in terms of exercise, in terms of training, joining training, in terms of exchange. But it does not have military commitment like defense commitment or neutral commitment. So we cannot expect that those countries will have certain actions during Taiwan contingency or during a Filipino contingency. However, we can expect that the bilateral military contacts and exercise will increase.
Renato, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, Professor Chen made a very important point. In a way, the visiting force agreement, status forces agreement are only auxiliary agreements. In the case, again, going back to the case of the Philippine-U.S. security relation, of course, we have the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty that provides for a mutual defense board that actually meets every 6 months. That's where, of course, they come out with war plans, contingency war plans that's renewed every 6 months. That will be the basis of any action just in case you have a contingency in the South China Sea or Taiwan. It will be based on the contingency planning of the Mutual Defense Board that meets either in Hawaii or, of course, in Manila. And, of course, they have this plan probably for the South China Sea, probably for Taiwan, which they look. So just in case if push comes to shove, that will be the base of their action. The visiting force agreement actually has two components. It has a wartime component. So it has a wartime component that's not made public. So,
and what does that say?
Under what condition of conflict? It's not publicly available, but everyone knows for a fact it has a wartime component.
So it sets out what these countries would do in a wartime...
U.S., specifically in the case of the United States. What will be the legal guarantees provided for American forces in case of a wartime situation? Again,
and do you know whether the others, VFAs or RAAs?
I think only in the specific in the case of the United States, because in the case of the United States, the visiting force agreement and, of course, the enhanced defense cooperation agreement has, of course, this motherhood agreement, which is the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, which, of course, provides for a specific body, the Mutual Defense Board, that plans for any armed contingency and, of course, wartime training.
Okay, so I get the point that you're both making, which is that this is just simply like the legal framework. I think that point is clear, but what we're trying to get at is to say, what does it enable? Yeah. So the net benefit, if we want to call that, Professor, is what for the Philippines, the region, Taiwan, if, as you say, this enables more exercises, more training, more meetings, more contingency planning?
So I do think that it would give Philippines more opportunities to get in touch with the United States and its Western allies. And this shows, I think this is a result, not a cause. This is a result of neighboring countries and NATO countries are showing their interest in Philippines' security. So in the future, if...
And why is that, if we can just define that again?
So China's military threat is pretty clear for many countries in the region, especially for Philippines right now, right? So the Philippines knows that it would be better to introduce more great powers to assist its security interest, especially in the territorial claim in South China Sea. Well, the past problem has been not all countries will be interested in supporting Philippines' territorial claim, right? The problem right now, what happens right now is that the increasing Chinese coercive threat make the regional countries and some NATO countries believe that these aggressions needs to be checked in some way. And assisting Philippines is part of it.